So I've worked in health food for a little over a year and a half now, and I have a lot of frustrations with it. Like primarily, or one of the first things is that a lot of the clientele are like very uninformed. A lot of people can't even pronounce like the diseases that they've been diagnosed with. I have people that say diabetes all the time, and people with things like diabetes and Crohn's like don't know what they can and cannot have, and they come in and talk to these people that are informed but are not doctors and ask them like what they should be eating, and they don't know already. And there are lots of things. I have people that don't know what protein does in the body. You learn that in like 6th grade.
The uninformed gluten epidemic, with people not knowing what celiac disease is. For just an assortment of things, muscle pain, sometimes anxiety and stuff like that. CBD is pretty well researched, and the research expands on it, but the whole kale movement and stuff like that, vegetables are good for you. They have lots of vitamins and minerals. Kale is not any more special than the others, I think.
Yeah, like a lot of many of the things in these stores, whether they be Whole Foods or like a little store like where you are, like a lot of them can be beneficial. They're just exaggerated. Like turmeric has curcumin in it, which is like an anti-inflammatory, but like the bioavailability of it is not like comparable to like a steroid that your doctor prescribes you. And things are prescribed too liberally. I think a lot of people are given access to too much medication, or medication that they don't need, which I guess bleeds into like the opioid epidemic and stuff. Not that I think that health food stores sell an equivalent to opioids.
Well, kratom is a big thing the last few years, and kratom, while itself is not, it's simultaneously not an opioid and an opioid. It contains something in it called mitragynine, or 7-mitragynine, which is it acts extremely similar to an opioid, and people are using it now as a pain pill, as a replacement. It can help with a lot of anxiety and depression in some cases, stuff like that. And it's mostly legal. There's a few states and a few counties within some states that are banning it, and there's been a big movement with the SISTA Act to ban things like kratom. But honestly, kratom is very helpful. It helps get a lot of people off. They use it in like methadone clinics to help people get off heroin and stuff like that. So there's lots of benefits to things like that. But it's all about at what point is something beneficial versus harmful for people to have easy access to something powerful.
Yeah, and that's an example of like the balancing act that you have to have when looking at like natural remedies versus like prescribed drugs. Like I have Crohn's disease, and I used marijuana for a long time to work with my Crohn's, but like it just will never replace like prednisone and Asacol for flare-ups. And I think that's like the biggest thing that bothers me, is that they're preying on people that are desperate. Like people that go into health food stores, like have cancer or knew someone that had cancer, or like a chronic illness like Crohn's. Mine isn't very bad, but some people it's debilitating. Like they don't work or leave the house very often, and they're preying on these people that are like desperate for like a silver bullet, and they're just, for a lot of diseases there isn't one.
Yeah.
They're preying on people's ignorance, which goes back to what I was saying earlier, that people are not willing to inform themselves or do research.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem in the health food industry, is that it's marketing to uninformed people mostly, and not all of it is bad information, and we talk all the time on misinformation, but a lot of it is misinformation.
Yeah, so a lot of there are those some things that I've seen in the stores and stuff, and it is just straight up snake oil. Like I can't think of a lot of like root extracts, and like a lot of the stuff that comes in like tinctures and stuff is just not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Oriental medicines. Nothing against Oriental people.
Yeah.
I have to edit that out.
But like just the advertising and stuff, and like especially like the bodybuilding community, the weight loss community, stuff like that. There's no magic cure for any of this. You cannot take a supplement and have it just rapidly accelerate your weight loss or anything like that. That's just not how it works. You cannot beat thermodynamics. It's always going to come down to calories in versus calories out. It's a simple thing of math.
Yeah, that's one thing I see a lot of is people getting weight loss pills, and I see these people regularly. Like they come in. That's another thing I noticed. They shop much more often because they're always just looking for that thing, and there's never that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this placebo where they say like, oh, I'm feeling like so much better now, but they're not really losing weight. They don't look much healthier. The people that I know, I know on a semi-personal level are sick.
Yeah, there's very few legal substances that can actually increase your metabolism to the point where it would be considered something that's like fat stimulating or something like that. And like ephedrine, for example, ephedrine is something that's strong enough to stimulate just a faster metabolism. But other than that, the research on caffeine increasing your metabolism, it does in some cases just very slightly. It's not really enough to make a difference, just a few calories at anything, which isn't going to help you lose a ton of weight. But it's all this marketing and stuff like that just makes it out to be like that you can just take any list of these pills and they'll all stimulate your metabolism.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of these things, whether it be Crohn's or cancer or just being generally unhealthy, you have to do what you were taught in school. Like you need to eat generally healthy and exercise. Most people don't exercise as much as they tell themselves they do, or at all. I mean, a lot of Americans never go to a gym like on a weekly basis.
Absolutely.
Which is a shame. And like I'm one to talk because I don't go to the gym regularly, obviously. But like the science that you learn in school, like in late elementary to high school, like those are the things that are going to keep you healthier than any like exotic herb or thing that they sell you in a health food store.
Absolutely. The fundamentals.
I do get long-winded.
It's alright. But knowing the basics of how your body works, like your anatomy and physiology, that's far more important than just sitting there reading all the articles you can from Huffington Post or Life magazine or whatever it's called about what's in and what's out for weight loss and stuff like that. Just learn the basics. Learn what like your metabolism is. Learn what thermodynamics is. You have to burn more calories than you eat. That's the basics.
I think a couple of like health food trends that are genuinely beneficial, and actually a couple of diets that both Tyler and I have experimented with, and that I pretty much do regularly now is keto, and then fasting. Fasting is the oldest medicine.
It is. Fasting is something that I practice very often. I do full 24-hour fasts, maybe twice a month depending, and I do intermittent fasting as a daily routine for, I'd say probably pretty close to 80% of the time, like a 16-8 divide, which means like you fast for 16 hours, during the night too. That way you kind of just burn up some of that time, and then you have an 8-hour window where you can actually consume your food. And there's been so much research on fasting in the last few years, and it's really like it has strong health benefits. Just not consuming anything like that. You stimulate things like HGH, human growth hormone, just tons of other stuff, and it can be really helpful, especially if you combine it with things like the ketogenic diet, which is it's been proven to be pretty useful for things, minus all the health conditions that it can help treat, like epilepsy and things like that. Just overall being a very efficient diet for humans.
Yeah, I mean, I have, I mentioned a couple times that I have Crohn's disease, and I've done fasting. I usually do it like once a week. I have to be careful with it, because I do have like a physical job, and I have to battle with keeping weight on. But fasting has been something that's been really beneficial to my gut, with inflammation, and then keto is as well. And something I noticed when I'm in keto is things that would normally affect me more, my gut do not. Like a lot of like nuts and like red meats don't flare me up as much when I'm in keto, because of the anti-inflammatory effects of it.
Yeah.
And two, a couple of things that are frustrating for me with folks that are customers of the health food. I'm gonna restart that because I don't want to sound retarded. A couple of things that are frustrating too for me are some things that people think are unhealthy for them, like on an inherent level, and that is fat and caffeine. fat has been a part of our diet since the dawn of time. and cutting it out of your diet is not nearly important as cutting sugar out of your diet, because that is something that will kill you, is sugar.
I completely agree with that. Fat is it's extremely important, especially for men. Fat helps for your testosterone production, things like that. It's actually vital for a lot of neurotransmitters, and we need it in our diets. And back in the early 2000s, when saturated fat and all that stuff was a big deal and everybody was trying to cut it out, making low-fat products, low-fat milk, all that stuff. And we can see that in results, it didn't do anything. But now it seems that we're moving in the right direction. The ketogenic diet's been getting very popular over the last few years. And I think it's going to result in, we'll see changes over the next 4 or 5 years or so, with less and less sugar as we progress, I think.
And something very important with the keto diet that I hear a lot of people doing, and this is important for your kidneys, your fat intake should be much higher than your protein intake. You should not be eating massive amounts of protein, because that becomes very toxic for your body.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually a thing, I believe it is called glucogenesis, and glucogenesis is the process in which your body converts excess proteins into carbohydrates, and that can break, I don't know if it converts it into carbohydrates, but I know that it can break your keto diet if you consume too much protein.
Yeah, think of it really as, what were we eating when we first came around? We didn't have bread in large quantities until very recently. Mm-hmm. And then what I mentioned earlier that I want to come back around to is caffeine. A lot of the people that worry, you should not be drinking a pot of coffee a day. Like, mm-hmm. if you struggle with caffeine addiction, yes, that is a problem. You're going to give yourself anxiety. It's not good for your heart. You hear about people that drink Monsters every day having heart attacks. But a lot of the people that come and talk about how bad caffeine is for you, they're reading case studies. Yeah. Because if you look at case studies as a whole, people that study caffeine, it's kind of 50-50. You hear it's anti-carcinogenic. Some people say it causes cancer. Some people say it's good for your brain, bad for your brain. But ultimately, there's no real consensus.
Yeah. Caffeine is it's generally regarded as safe. You just use the proper dosing. The FDA recommends at most about 400 milligrams a day. Don't go over much more than that. Caffeine's been proven for I didn't mean to interrupt you, but neuroprotective. It's good for brain cells, stuff like that.
And for people that don't know caffeine by milligram content, how many cups of coffee is that? Because I actually don't know that.
It depends on what kind of coffee you drink. Usually a cup of coffee is regarded as 80 milligrams, I think. A Monster is roughly 141 milligrams.
So 200 then.
So yeah, some energy drinks have 200. There's the new Bang energy drinks. They have almost 300 milligrams of caffeine. And the FDA is not actually, they don't require people to put the caffeine content on the drink. Mm-hmm. So you'll see in a lot of energy drinks, they don't actually show the caffeine content. And if they do, they're hidden within all the disclaimers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you actually just have to go on the internet and do your own research, but you can easily just Google name of energy drink caffeine content, you'll find it right away.
I do think that people, because caffeine is not treated like a drug, I do think that it should be required to list caffeine content. Mm-hmm. And then one last thing, there's a difference between drinking 400 milligrams of caffeine throughout your day via multiple cups of coffee and drinking 300 all at once as soon as you wake up in the morning.
Yeah, definitely. If you're going to do it, you should spread it out, and you should not consume caffeine, depending on your schedule, obviously, but not after 2-3 o'clock, something like that. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5 hours, so that means that half of the drug will be in your system 5 hours later. So if you consume 300 milligrams of caffeine at 4 o'clock, at 9 p.m., you're still going to have 150 milligrams of caffeine in your system, which could keep you awake at night and disrupt your sleep cycles and stuff like that. And if you just use caffeine habitually like that, you're just interrupting your sleep quality, and you're just perpetuating the problem of being tired all the time, having to consume more and more caffeine. Sleep is one of the most important things for your health. Regardless of how much sleep you actually get, some people do need different amounts. And I didn't mean to go off topic here, but just some people need only 6 hours of sleep. Some people do need 9.5, 10 hours of sleep. But the most important thing is going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. because your circadian rhythm is very important to keep in check like that.
Yeah, I will say that, like, you hear a lot of people say 8.5 hours of sleep, and that is really horseshit. Like, if I sleep much longer than 8.5 hours, I'll be tired for the rest of the day. I pretty much function at peak at like 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
It is very different from person to person. going to be pretty much the common format, I think. Because it has like a diving back in kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked in health food for a little over a year and a half now, and I have a lot of frustrations with it. Like primarily, or one of the first things is that a lot of the clientele are like very uninformed. A lot of people can't even pronounce like the diseases that they've been diagnosed with. I have people that say diabetes all the time, and people with things like diabetes and Crohn's like don't know what they can and cannot have, and they come in and talk to these people that are informed but are not doctors and ask them like what they should be eating, and they don't know already. And there are lots of things. I have people that don't know what protein does in the body. You learn that in like 6th grade.
The uninformed gluten epidemic, with people not knowing what celiac disease is.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna have a lot of cutting in this.
Cut one.
Huh?
I said cut number 1. Couple final things I want to touch on with nootropics is that while some of them definitely do have real benefits, I do think that a lot of them are placebos, and placebos are okay because they do work. There's even a placebo-placebo effect, where even if you know that you're taking a placebo, it can still create a response. But nothing will replace the fundamentals again. Just stick to the sleep cycles and stuff like that. Stick to a proper diet. Just train yourself to be more efficient without having to resort on drugs. Just get everything in check first, and then if you still feel like you need an advantage in some way, then you can move on to things like nootropics. Just make sure the fundamentals are down first.
Yeah, I think that scheduling minimalism, like minimalism in your schedule, and training yourself can be far more beneficial. And I don't want to sound boring, because that's what everyone tells you. Like that's what like your teachers and your parents will tell you. But it is the truth that training yourself to be efficient will always be having to take something. And I knew a lot of people for a while that took nootropics, and a lot of them really walked around talking about like how good they felt and how productive they were being. But then like at the end of the week or at their deadline, they really didn't get that much more done.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're already a workaholic, it may give you that edge because you're already trained to be, working 12, 14-hour days. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings on effectiveness.
Yeah, some of them are definitely, like I said, placebos, and some of them, while they do work, it's just the effect is kind of just barely noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just scratches underneath the surface. But the strong ones you will notice effect from. If you take modafinil, you will know that you're on modafinil. There's very few people who are just non-responders to it. And if you don't want to go the route and you wanted to try something like modafinil, there's actually a version of it called armodafinil, which you can, or not armodafinil, adrofinil. Adrofinil is available on like Amazon. Sometimes you can find it in very niche health food stores and stuff like that. But adrofinil is it's a precursor to modafinil. So you take adrofinil and it converts in your liver into modafinil. So to achieve the same effect, you would have to take a much higher dose, which kind of makes it a little more safer. But on the negative side, it makes it a little more taxing on your liver. But if you wanted to kind of just get started with something, adrofinil is a good way to go.
Yeah, and that comes to mind with taking a lot of these substances, but not all of them. They're all very trying on your filtration system, on
Mm-hmm.
your liver and or kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
So he mentioned drinking a lot of water with modafinil, but you should really be drinking, if you're taking these substances, hopefully legally, you should be drinking a lot of water.
Definitely. Hey Google, what's H.P. Lovecraft's cat's name?
According to Wikipedia, the name of the cat, man, has often been cited in the